multiple cars, as I mentioned earlier on, so Nuoff in a very precarious situation, but he often finds himself in these places. He doesn't qualify as well as he races.
Up front, they are getting with Lee Aberdeen and Luca Varani, not very far apart at all here. But I just want to see how Alistair Haig deals with Marcello Kessler coming around the old hairpin.
I would say it's not the best decision they've ever made, just not having done that under the safety car, really.
Yeah, they're taking their pit stop strategies from Ferrari lately or something. What's going on?
In turn one, just too much gas on them, too much feet on the loud pedal, and unfortunately he's dropped him all the way down the order. But Philip Hammer is out in front by an 8.91 seconds. Dan Michael is a wall there, sir. And definitely doesn't want to be hitting that earlier on as well.
Difficult, the understeer is in the dirty air through that final corner because it's such a long corner and you get dragged off into the grass very easily. He'll have the slipstream down in towards the chicane. Peterson was briefly alongside, but that slipstream has saved him and kept him in third.
Yeah, Varani now lost a little bit of time to Aberdeen, about half a second. Peterson is Pike's pushed Morton forward up ahead. He's got out of line. Is now Pike going to have a go at Werrell? Don't push him off. He's in the championship fight. Jack Werrell chasing down Carl Jacklin. Further down, Rob Williams and Chris Barnes.
Sensational run outside line now though for the heavy braking zone. Around the outside goes the Audi R8.
Look how much Miller's caught back into play. Exactly. Miller's still such up. He's not on second and change. All of a sudden Miller's back in play.
On to the back end of Phil Jocelyn. So there's been a lot of movers and shakers in this first 2 laps here for race.
Absolutely serious racing league. Everybody's allowed to have fun. Yeah, and it's all about the entertainment. So I hope everybody is enjoying themselves out there in the chat. We know that Ron is been enjoying himself watching. The Burger King machines off into the grass a little bit there as they're really bunching up now.
Does he have it?
Medeiros is going to get it.
Oh, look at the toss! They haven't got it!
He's on the outside line though, going into the fastest corner on the circuit. Surely this can't work.
Dominic Ligner has got a sensational run outside line now though for the heavy braking zone. Around the outside goes the Audi R8.
Look how much Miller's caught back into play. Exactly. Miller's still such chopper. He's not on second and change. All of a sudden, Miller's back in play.
Can Barry do it? Big Barry's gonna do it! Big Barry!
Good evening, everybody, and welcome along to the opening race of Season 12 here at PRL. It's Imola to kick us off for Season 12, which, of course, one of the most historic tracks on the calendar. My name is Darragh Thacker, and joining me in the booth is Joshua Griffin, Meek. And for this race, and Josh, Imola, qualifying can be important here. We're in the first few minutes of qualifying, but track position is important. Only one DRS straight here at Imola, so, you know, a starting position could be really helpful to set you up for this 32-lap race.
Absolutely, Darragh. It's a pleasure to be here as well. But as you mentioned, that DRS straight, it is oh so powerful, as well as the slipstream heading down into turn 2. It's certainly going to be something to keep an eye on. And perhaps maybe starting at the front row might not be necessarily where a lot of these drivers are trying to aim for. Let's put it that way. Let's say personally, I would prefer to start third, watch the carnage happen in front of me, and be able to try and pick my way around Tamarello heading down into Villeneuve. But then again, there's a reason I'm in the commentary booth, Darragh, and not on the track like these beautiful, talented drivers are. I mean, looking at Don War 95 here in the Ferrari, just about to finish up his lap. It's not looking bad at all. And we've certainly got a lot of pace on show here today. I mean, the variety of drivers here as well. We was mentioning it earlier when we was in the lobby. We're having, you know, representation from the likes of the Americas, Ireland, Scotland. Really, it's a whole, you know, unison of drivers here, and it's really fantastic to watch the community come together in such a manner.
It's nice, isn't it? I mean, there's lots of leagues where a lot of the drivers are all British or all American. It's great to see leagues where you've got so many different nationalities on the grid. But you're absolutely right. We might see a few drivers just thinking about the grid position, even if they're not starting right at the front where they might want to be. We've seen so many times, both on the game and in real life down at Tamburello, not just in F1 but in other championships as well, that absolute carnage can ensue, and just picking your way through, making sure you're not involved in it can really, really help you out. I also believe one of, if not the longest pit lane on the calendar here at Imola, so you really, really need to be careful about your front wing, because that can cost you more time than at most other tracks on the calendar.
Yeah, of course, and you've got to consider as well, it won't just be visible damage. This game has a little funny way it calculates for damage using percentages here and there, but you've got to realistically think, although there might not be visible damage on the front wing, if you end up losing 2% of that front wing, you could be losing up to a tenth or maybe even 2 tenths per lap, especially with, you know, hard-hitting corners such as Aqua Minerale and Peratella as well, where downforce on the front end is so heavily required through, not even the longevity of a race, even if you've got open air in front of you, it is so desperate to try and get all the downforce possible heading through those fast sort of flowing corners, which we see so much around here. Realistically, any bit of damage could cost them a race. I mean, might have to come down to potentially picking an opportune moment to replace a front wing if they pick up damage, because is it really worth sitting through this very long pit lane to get maybe a tenth of a lap slower out of the way?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good point to make as well. But with the fact that we've only got 10 races on the calendar for Season 12, every missed opportunity, well, every race where you might lose a front wing, lose about 7-8 positions, it's going to really cost you. You've not got too much time to regain those places in the championship hunt. So some of these guys are going to be very, very keen to get the points on the board early. We see Bunsey going up into P2, 14.2. He's still about 3.5 tenths, I should say, off the back of Paco in the Ferrari, currently leading the way. But a very good lap time for him in the Red Bull, and we'll hope, and he'll be hoping to stay there or thereabouts by the end of qualifying, about halfway through. But a lot of drivers you can see on out laps for now, but. I think laps really, you're going to want to start to get a good lap time in now so that you can really go for it in the final runs.
Yeah, 100%. You kind of got to build up your momentum. It's one of those tracks, I've already said it, it's very flowing. It comes very naturally to some drivers, while other drivers have to work extremely hard to try and get it into that operating window where they feel comfortable to push the car. I mean, it doesn't take 2 seconds to realise the track limits around here are harsh, especially heading through the likes of Aqua Minerale, as we mentioned before. It's such a technical part of a circuit, and even running wide over a bit of AstroTurf, it might not look like it's going to gain you the world of time, but the game will think so, and the game will punish you by invalidating your lap time, which could potentially see you go from, a potential P2, P3 lap time all the way down towards the bottom. So it is absolutely crucial that these drivers be able to put in a solid banker lap before they can really give it some throttle, let's say, for the final runs of a session. Of course, they should be able to go out on fresh set of soft compound tyres throughout this session. They wouldn't necessarily need to use a set of scrub tyres. You can already tell by the way Di Natale is chucking that Mercedes through. He's more than happy to burn through a bit of that soft compound rubber.
I just saw, actually, yeah. That sim racer just in behind, you might have seen it on the screen.
A little
His
drift.
rear end. Yeah, he was going all over the place through Tosa. I don't know where he was trying to be going, but it wasn't going in a straight line. We'll see if he can keep this up. Of course, his teammate not far in front of him, but another big moment for him just as he rises up Aqua Minerale. So he's not looking comfortable in that car. He's a few tenths down in the middle sector. But his teammate, Denard, not too far in front. But yeah, maybe a setup change. Of course, setup. I don't know if Park Fermi is on or off at the moment, but yeah, that setup. It doesn't look too promising if you're losing the rear end with not much fuel in the car as it is, when you're going to have 32 laps of fuel in about 10 minutes' time. So we'll hope that he sorts it out. But Denard improves a bit, just set a 15.6, I believe, and he is in P12.
Of course, I mean, it's sometimes the way the cookie crumbles around here, isn't it? You can go for a very qualifying-orientated setup, very good on the light fuel, but you'll notice the rear starts to slide more, the tyre dead gets heavier throughout the race, almost, an insurmountable level to some points where you got to really start seeing them struggle a lot earlier than the cars around them. So potentially a little bit to worry about for that sim racer, currently in P7 in the Mercedes, but considering it was an in-lap, I don't necessarily feel like he's got that much to worry about. Perhaps he was just trying to show us some of the special moves he can do in that Mercedes car. Of course, without the use of the DAS system, it's a lot harder to drift nowadays. Let's say that one.
Yeah, it's it's not the easiest, but he's finding a way, isn't he? 5 minutes to go in this session, then. And we'll have to see who comes out on top. Paco still leads the way. He's in the pit lane at the moment. Scorenzi with that P2 time. He's 14.1, just a couple of tenths off, just shy of a couple of tenths off the Ferrari for the moment. But we're probably going to expect one more lap, I think, from everybody in this session. I mean, the likes of Mackie in P5, I believe he is on a run in the Williams car, but he's just down by a tenth through the middle sector, bumping his way over the Variante Alta. Of course, very high curbs through there, and then we'll run his way down towards Ravazza 1 and 2. You really don't want to invalidate your lap time here, which can be so easy to do if you go just that little bit wide, trying to push every little millimetre through Imola, a track where you do see quite a lot of warnings, quite a lot of penalties. But he's going to bail on that one, going to come into the pit lane, which is a shame, because I was setting him up there for a good time, but in the end, stays P5, we'll come to the pit lane, and we have 4 minutes to go or so, but there are a few more drivers out on the track.
Yeah, of course. So what I just really want to quickly point out here is PRL Crew Steamers. It's been very comfortably going around on that soft compound tyre. perhaps maybe doing a couple practice runs before deciding to really try and bolt a fresh set of tyres on and go for it, because it's not something you quite often see, is it, where drivers go and do 2-3 laps on the same compound in qualifying. A very unique take from the Aston Martin driver. Could it be fortuitous, though, come the end of this session? Feel like we might have to wait and see for that one to really see whether it's going to, work its magic. But certainly something interesting, something we don't quite often see. So, for me, potential could be there for it to maybe find its way to, definitely the top end of a timing sheet.
But of course, time is running out in this session. F7R Banana in the Alpine is currently on a lap I've just seen, and he is coming into the Ravazza corners now. Currently nearly half a second up, as you can see. Now through Ravazza 2, just about keeping the rear end intact. We'll just open that DRS just before you get to the line. And what's the time saying? He improves to P9, just under 1 minute 15. It's a 14.993, just over a second off the fastest time we have seen so far. But he's currently in the top 9, of course. In a race like this, if this was, F1 2021, F1 2020 even, you wouldn't want to start in the top 10 because, of course, you wouldn't get that free tyre choice. That feels like a long time ago. But it doesn't matter anymore, does it? You can just choose whatever tyre you want, whichever position you start from, but just in squeezing inside the top 10. But there's a nice little gaggle of cars there, isn't there? Between that Sim Racer, Rapid Mini and Banana, 7th, 8th and 9th. There's only about half a tenth in it.
Exactly, and you gotta start thinking, right? How much are these drivers putting onto this qualifying run? How much are they really trying to push for cars on these laps? Because of course they could still have a potential to go around, recharge the battery, and maybe give it another go on the same set of tyres without having to dive it into the pits. As we're going to see Rabin now approaching the finish line here. What sort of lap time will Rabin be able to put in? It's a slight improvement, hops him up into P3, but yet again, still 3 tenths off pole. I feel like Pacco's lap time, it could be something that we might have to be in a bit of amazement at come the end of this session if no one's able to get too much closer to it. Because realistically, Scornsey seems to be the only one necessarily being able to put him under threat.
Yeah, and I think Pacco's going to be feeling quite good about how this is going for him so far. I mean, like you said, he's not really come under much threat. Scarenzi's within a couple of tenths, but he's never really looked worried. I think that was maybe even his anchor lap time as well that we saw from Pacco. So he's going along very nicely indeed. Hopefully for his sake, he will get away from the line quickly, but he's still not got that pole nailed on just yet. If you want to be setting a lap time in this final...
We've had an incident. The AlphaTauri was on a hot lap and I don't believe the Red Bull saw him coming. Oh dear, that is, catastrophe heading into Villeneuve. It's not the first time we've saw it there either. Oh, that's going to be very unfortunate for both drivers there. P4 and P10 are forced to retire from the session. Banana as well, I believe, has retired from the session, but I believe that was a retiree in the pit lane, which won't affect that too much. But if he feels like he's been able to maximise what he's capable out on track, there's no harm in saving this last minute, maybe going to get a refreshment, maybe just, going over some data with engineers, really trying to chuck it up a little bit and finding out where they can find a little bit more lap time to improve come the start of a race. Maybe analysing a couple of the lines the other drivers have taken to see if there's anything in there which could perhaps find, a little bit more time closing into that, 1 second average between P9 and pole position. It's quite a large margin, but... we've already mentioned qualifying setups around here. They are so much more powerful than you would necessarily expect, especially in comparison to other circuits as well. Imola just seems to have that knack where once you get the car in a perfect window on low fuel, you can find lap time around every corner, around every traction zone. It just seems to keep growing and growing throughout the course of a race.
It does, exactly, and it's because it's it's a particular track, isn't it? Because there aren't really many like it in that regard. But it's a good challenge to start the season. The timer has hit 0. Dom is coming into the pit lane. I thought he might be setting a lap time, but it'll be down to the two Williams to set their final lap times first. Of course, Bunsey, Banana, Eric, Rabin, and Dom are all finished with their sessions, whether they've retired or they've just been in the pit lane. Let's see what Mackie can do through the final corner. That rear end stepping out just a little bit, opens congratulations to DRS. Going to get into the top 5. You bet he can. He's on the front row as it stands. P2 for Mackie at the moment. His teammate Tintoretto. P12 can only stay P12. Can't improve his position. Slight improvement on time. Meanwhile, I think we're looking at Crew Steamers. He can only set a time for P13, but that was his banker. Realistically, didn't really get a very clean lap time. And we'll look at Paco as well, because he's still improving. He's got the fastest time. He's got provisional pole, but he's looking for a 13.8, maybe a 13.7 as he runs to the line. It's going to be in the end a 13.791, and that should be pole, you'd have thought, with a few more drivers left to come across the line. Rapid Kitch can go P6, but with, I think, only that sim racer to go, it looks pretty safe for Paco. But what can the Mercedes driver do up towards the line? Can he get himself into the front couple of rows? Currently P9, he does. He goes P3, a great improvement at the end. But it is Paco. He's going to be on pole, and he's going to have that clean run down towards the Tamburello chicane.
Yeah, of course. I mean, realistically, give him a slipstream behind it could be putting him in maybe a bit of a vulnerable position, but you've got to assume from the pace we've seen so far from Paco in this qualifying session, he might look to try and build on this, start heading out of Tamburello into Villeneuve, into Tosa, and just slowly just keep tapping away at that battery, whittling that gap further and further to P2, until hopefully for his sake he'll be able to break the DRS before lap 3, because boy oh boy, Darragh, don't we know how powerful that DRS can be down this main straight?
Yeah, I think compared to most tracks, Imola does have some incredibly powerful DRS. The ERS as well can be really useful around here. It's not easy to save. I mean, it's not as difficult as a track like Qatar, where it's almost there's no heavy braking zone. It's pretty much impossible to save ERS. But you wouldn't say that there are any properly heavy braking zones here at Imola. There are some medium speed zones, braking zones. You think of down at turn 1, maybe down at the Variante Alta, but there's no real slow speed corners on the track. So ERS saving can be really important. We'll just have to see how Paco can do from the front. I mean, you can see the gap as well. Mackie Sim Racer and Scarenzi, there's only a few hundredths in that little gap. I mean, they could find each other fighting over P2 for quite a lot of this race.
But Darragh, I'm going to paint you a picture. Imagine a world where P2, P3 and P4 don't battle each other. They decide to work together. They use their ERS in unison. They use the DRS together to try and mount a challenge to Paco. If I was one of those 3 drivers and I had any form of communication with the other 2, I'd be looking to try and work with them to close up that distance, to close it up, to try and put Paco in an uncomfortable situation, to make sure he's feeling the pressure of 3 very quick drivers, all at similar pace levels, being able to hold on to the back of him. And not only hold on to the back of him, but maybe even pressure him heading into the Tamburello chicane, heading into Tosa, following him closely through Pilaterra and Acqua Minerale, just being on his gearbox for that entire time. It might not necessarily seem like it's going to be too much, but over the course of the 32 laps we've got here, it will slowly start whittling away at Paco's mental. And if Paco wasn't necessarily anticipating this level of competition here, maybe he was thinking he would be able to come and set a great lap time and run away. But as long as the drivers behind are able to keep up a slight bit of pressure on him throughout the course of this race, it will of course take a mental toll on Paco, and it might change his driving style slightly. And is that slight change going to be enough to potentially put him out of risk of a podium?
Exactly. But here we go. Straight away. We're now going for the formation.
Okay.
I've got very used, because of course there has been formation lap glitches, hasn't there, on the game?
Yes.
I'm very used to just going right. We're going immediately, but yeah, we've got a formation lap just to get our heads ready, get us excited and ready to see what's going on. We can look at the tyres that the drivers have chosen, and it's pretty split. I mean, we've got only 5 drivers on the hards, majority going for the mediums, but interestingly, Paco on the hards, Mackie on the mediums. Mackie's looking for that run towards turn 1.
Yeah, if he's able to get a solid launch off the start here, he could find himself in a brilliant position to try and control the pace of this race, and maybe not necessarily help the drivers behind him, but certainly hinder Paco's performance, because if Paco's able to build a distance and pull away on this hard set of tyres in this initial stint, it could spell trouble for the rest of the drivers when it's time for them to switch over to the hard compound tyre. We should be looking at a typical one-stop here, from the hard to the mediums, or the mediums to the hards. I wouldn't necessarily expect to see too many soft tyres, especially given that it is overcast. You can see the clouds in the sky. They're not necessarily looking the brightest. The track's not the warmest here today. So it'll certainly be a key challenge to try and build up the temperatures in that hard compound tyre as well. And while you've got all that going on, you're having to be mindful, because we know how flowing this circuit is and we know how heavy it can be on the engine. You're going to have to make sure to pull out of the toe of some of the cars, maybe, you know, coming out of a Variante Alta, maybe heading, you know, into Toaster, just being able to get a little bit of fresh air into your engine, just so you can get that extra couple of horsepower necessary with your engine at that perfect temp to try and get a run and an overtake on the cars around you. It's certainly going to be something that these drivers are going to have to consider. Some of the drivers will have to really closely manage throughout the course of this race, and I feel like it's only going to get worse the further they are in the DRS train, because, you know, two things in life are inevitable. Death and DRS trains around Imola. They go hand in hand.
Yeah, they do, don't they? I mean, if you lose the DRS train as well, with us saying that the DRS train, it can be so powerful, if you're in a train and you just make a little mistake halfway through the lap and you lose out that gap and that DRS, you can really come under pressure. And it can start to ruin your race if you make a couple of mistakes, drop back a couple of positions. Then in the pit stop strategy, it's not really going to work out for you. But we've got 32 laps ahead of us to see who will come out on top. Paco has got the best seat in the house, of course. Mackie will be hoping to get the launch off of the line. But with the formation lap, they can try and put themselves in the right angle to be facing down towards turn 1. But the 5 red lights are coming on here at Imola. Mackie is going to be trying to get the launch on those medium tyres. And the lights are out, and we are away here at Imola. But Paco, he's got a good launch. He's got a nice start. Scorenzi's the one, if anything, with a fantastic launch off of the line. He might be going for the move on Mackie here as they come in towards turn 1. But Paco controls the line, controls the lead, and he leads us away. They're still fighting for that sim racer. What a move for P3 around the outside of the Tamburello chicane. But they'll dive towards Villeneuve with Paco still in the lead.
Yeah, of course, it was a very risky move to try and put it around the outside, but Scorenzi kind of realised the position he was in, being squeezed into the apex. It's not necessarily best to continue that fight. Sometimes it's better to back off and choose to fight another day. As we've got an instant slightly further down the pack, I believe that's Crew Steamers, who has ended up spinning before Tosa. That would have been on the exit of Villeneuve, and you can see yet again that Mercedes going sideways through a corner. I don't feel like that's a choice at this point. I feel like that Mercedes is absolutely unhinged, as you see that sim racer really struggling to try and build up that rear tyre temp and necessarily control the car under throttle as well. So that'll be something that'll definitely play into the hands of Scorenzi throughout the course of this race. If that Mercedes is going to keep having moments on its rear tyres, you can expect the tyre deg to be a lot worse on the rear of that Mercedes than you could on perhaps maybe the back of the Ferrari, the back of a Williams, or the back of his Haas car, all of which he's going to be looking to try and get involved in and maybe have a little bit of a squabble.
I have to hope for his sake the setup is going to work for him on that hard tyre. Might work better through on the mediums in the second part of the race, but we'll look at Scorenzi here. Oh, getting very close, but not quite close enough to make a move into Tamburello. With the main straight being kinked as it is, with about 3 or 4 little kinks in it, it's so difficult to try and go for the move. We've seen in real life, in many championships, including F1, where the little changes in direction on the straight can cause to accidents. You could say that that's what happened with George Russell and Valtteri Bottas back in 2021. That led to them coming together. And it's difficult when you're trying to go for a move, maybe down the inside. There is always that risk of a little bit of contact, unintentional contact, but contact that could give you some wing damage and really would cost you.
Yeah, of course, and once again we see that Mercedes sliding through Piratella. I'm not sure what it is with that setup. I'm not sure whether it is setup related. It might be tyre related. It might be because that hard compound tyre can't necessarily get fired up. But you can see Scorenzi is not caring in the slightest. He can see an opportunity to strike in the Haas car, and he's certainly going to be trying to take it. You can see him still following yet again very closely. He's going to have to be mindful of the dirty air coming off the back of a Mercedes. Despite these cars now having ground effect, dirty air can still play an absolute prominent feature, and Scorenzi is within 2 temps. Surely we can expect an overtake here through the many kinks of this straight, and you can see already pulling over to that left hand side, making it very apparent what he was trying to do. So there's going to be no Valtteri Bottas George Russell instances down this main straight so far.
Got to be careful though, of course, because we've seen Scorenzi. I mean, we were on board for him briefly a minute ago. I think you could see that green light was showing that he was using some of that overtake in his ERS store. You've got to remember how you've got to use that ERS. As Don Moore, I think, has gone off at the back, which is unfortunate for him. But using too much too early can really start to be a problem for these guys later in the race. As we mentioned, that it's hard to recuperate that ERS store in the battery, so he's got to be careful with it. All whilst this is going on though, Paco is out of that 1 second window for DRS on that hard tyre. Mackie, he's not been able to stay there long enough, and he's going to start to come under pressure from Scarenzi, and they're going to have to work together, as you mentioned at the start of the race, to try and get back in that DRS, because otherwise Paco's going to start to run away with this here.
Yeah, that sim racer picking up a 3-second time penalty with that Mercedes car once again drifting slightly wide, coming out of the Variante Alta chicane and picking up another warning to get himself a penalty on the exit of the curb. Yeah, again, I mean, how many times are we going to have to say the track penalties around here can be very, very strict? But I do believe a couple of these drivers won't necessarily mind too much. They'll be expecting drivers around them to also receive penalties, as I believe. We've got Rabin here, who's on an absolute tear, potentially looking to jump all the way from P5 up into P2. With a little rub in his racing, manages to try and get the move around the outside of the Williams there. But they're still so close on track together. Scornsey secures himself P2. But, I mean, realistically, we're going to be looking at this battle for what could potentially be the majority of this race. As we do have to mention, Paco has now pulled out a 3-second lead. Paco is more than happy to try and check out of this race and run his own race. Of course, Ferrari's home at Imola, surely going to look in to try and impress the Tifosi around here. And I'm very keen to sort of see how that sim racer is going to be able to cope with, you know, potentially getting a bit of marbles on his tyres as well. That surely won't help him coming out of these corners. But maybe when the race gets further in and that fuel just becomes a little bit lighter, maybe that Mercedes car is going to become a little bit more responsive on the rear and won't have as many snaps as it's having so early on in this session. Because something I have noticed looking through a couple of these cars is a lot of them have underfueled by 1 or 2 laps. So we can definitely expect a little bit more lifting and coasting. But of course, Darragh, you've got to think, if you're lifting and coasting slightly more, that's less time to brake. And then, of course, if it's less time to brake, it's less time to charge the battery.
Yeah, exactly. And it's completely true. As we see Rapid Kitch going for the move now on Mackie, who is just slipping back a bit. But Rabin, as you said last lap, fantastic move for him. All the way around the outside, but Mackie now finding it with Kitch. They're side by side, bouncing over those sausage curbs, off the track a little bit. Here's the corner. He's made the move. There's contact, and Kitch is around. Here comes that sim racer as well, maybe looking for it into the Villeneuve chicane. But that's very, very difficult to make a move around the outside there, and he can't quite do it. But we saw last lap that sim racer got onto the grass once Rabin was coming through and the likes of Mackie were fighting away with Scarenzi, and it cost him positions. The same has happened here for Kitch, and it's unfortunate, and it's dropped him into that second train behind Rapid Mini. So there's a couple of trains forming, and it is where we're going to see most of the battling, but Scarenzi is starting to regain some of that time back to Paco that they lost fighting. It was 3 seconds, as you mentioned. It's now down to 2.7. It's not enough, obviously, because the race will come back to Paco, likely to go hard medium, whereas Scarenzi, Rabin, they'll probably go medium hard. So it's not enough at the moment, but they are starting to try and work together. Rabin will likely come through with the DRS, but early stage of this race, it's been some frantic action, hasn't there?
Yeah, and I'd absolutely keep an eye on this battle currently for P4. Mackie is doing exactly what he needs to do with Matt Williams, placing his car perfectly amongst the apexes to make it very difficult for Rapid Connor to try and seize an opportunity heading through Sector 3. But of course, you come once again back to this DRS straight, and because it is so long, because it is so powerful, we're going to see a double move there for the McLaren and the Mercedes as AJ Mackie goes straight on, and he's backwards in the gravel trap. That's not where the Williams wants to be in the slightest.
I think there was contact there between Mackie and that sim racer on the entry to the corner. Again, I think because you don't really know what the line is for the drivers, I think there was a little bit of contact between them, and it's meant that AJ Mackie's been spun around. It's just giving hope to the likes of Eric Rapid Mini, who are just gaining places just by a lot of these little incidents happening. I mean, he's up 4. He started in P10. He's been the biggest mover up the field so far. And it's currently going very nicely for him. If he can start to try and gain to the back of that sim racer as well on those medium tyres, we could see him potentially try and fight his way towards a podium spot. But at the moment, the interesting fight, you'd say, for the big points in this race is between Rabin and Scarenzi and how they play it out here, because it's likely that they're just going to keep overtaking each other lap after lap with the DRS, but if it starts to get heated, it could bring the others into it.
Yeah, no, I mean, we've already seen him take a couple corners wide, take it very leisurely on corner exits, opening up steering a little bit too early, being affected by the dirty air, picking up track warnings, which of course will not help them in their attempt to try and march back up to Paco, as we already see Paco already going through turn 2, turn 3 now, before even Scarenzi and Rabin approach turn 2. I mean, realistically, you got to start thinking, Scarenzi and Rabin, what can they do to try and catch back up to Paco? Because at the minute, it just looks like Paco might be in a league of his own. But I'm sure Scornsy and Rabin are going to be slowly, conversating, trying to cook up some sort of plan to try and catch back up to Paco, because realistically, Paco on this hard compounded tyre, it just seems to be an absolute phenomenal tyre for him. Whether, he's more acclaimed and more used to running these harder compounds, of course, or at Imola, not the softest compounds on the car. Perhaps he might be a hard tyre whisperer. End of the day, we're going to have to wait and see, because there's still a lot left of this race, and dare I even mention, a safety car can come out and almost entirely flip the script, and then of course that'll put a couple of these drivers in a little bit of jeopardy. But once again, we see Rabin taking an alternative line coming out the very Alta chicane, and running very, very wide, obviously causing him to lose a little bit of time to Screnzi. But he's got to be careful. He can't keep running those sort of lines, and he can't keep falling into these sort of mistakes, because if he keeps doing that, Rapid Connor's going to get brought right back into this fight, and he could be looking to try and hunt down P2.
Yeah, Rabin was always, we have a DNF, Rapid Mini, that is the final corner, that is a safety car, as you mentioned.
It's commentator curse. I've already done it. I've already summoned a safety car here. I've been here for, a matter of 30 minutes, and I've already caused a safety car. I'm so sorry, guys. My bad.
I think we've all done it, haven't we? Out of the final corner, you just lose that rear end on that curb, and that's the end of your race. And Rapid Mini is out. The safety car coming out means that the likes of Donmore and Bunsey can try and then regain, because they were nearly a lap down, but they can try and gain to the back of the pack once again. But it's interesting now on the strategy. What do you do on the strategy? Does Paco maybe go for a medium here? Does he risk that kind of strategy, or does he sit on the hards and wait for it? He's clearly got more pace than the rest of the field, and if you're on a medium, what do you do? Do you go to the hards for the end? It opens the door for different strategy calls now.
Yes, I think if you're on the medium tyre, you've got to seriously consider diving it back into the pits, putting a set of hards on, and trying to run them to the end. But if you're, necessarily into the hard compound tyre, whether you're Crew Streamers, Slim Racer, Paco, you're faced with a very, very awkward decision, because you can do as you said and try and attempt a two-stop strategy, but of course, over the course of time, it's not going to be the quickest. You're going to have to do some more overtaking. Or do you try and stick it out with this hard compound tyre, weather the storm at the start of a safety car restart, and then keep running your own race, trusting that those hard compound tyres, which other drivers are going to pit on, are going to be in a much worse shape? But we can see Paco diving it into the box, and he's gone for a set of mediums, a potential two-stopper here at play for the Ferrari driver.
Yeah, this could work out well. It'd be interesting if we go safety car 3 to the end. Of course, we definitely not a given, but if we go safety car 3, could Paco on a medium beat a hard strategy to the end? We'll have to wait and see. Rabin as well, maybe going for that medium strategy. It's going to be... Well. It's possible to get those mediums to the end, you'd have said, but very difficult. They're going to be pretty much dead towards the end, but if you start tyre saving right from the start of the stint, it could be possible to get them to the end, but at the same time, would you rather tyre save and try and manage and nurse them to the end, or just go hell for leather for 12 laps, then come back into the pit lane, and then have another 12 laps of qualifying laps, effectively? So, it's interesting.
Or even, right, hear me out, Darragh. You go hell for leather at the safety car restart, you pull away, you build that DRS gap back up, you push with all of your might, you deploy all your battery to build up that gap for when your tyres start falling off, and when those hards start coming into fruition, into their operating window, into their prime space, you'll slowly start getting reeled in. But if they're still fighting one another, if Scornsy and Rabin keep up this attitude of constantly trying to fight each other, constantly trying to one-up each other going down that DRS straight, costing each other time, forcing each other into errors, going wide, picking up warnings here and there, you could potentially see yourself maintaining the gap, not necessarily losing it come the end of your stint. But then again, there's a reason I'm not racing, Darragh. It's because I'm not the best in the world. I'm not great at strategy, and I'm not great at decision making. For me, I would have probably put a set of soft tyres on, gone for fastest lap, and called it a day after that, to be honest with you, mate.
Go anywhere from here, really. We're in that little stage of the race where you get a safety car, where we're about a quarter of the way through, where you would say it might be too long to get mediums to the end, but a medium would still be a viable option. So you're in that little, debate window of whether you go for that two-stop or whether you just go for the one-stop. But we will see. On to lap 10 with the safety car. Should come in at the end of this lap, the safety car, because Bunsey should very much easily catch the back of the pack by the time that we get towards the Ravazza 1 next lap, which is lovely to see. We don't want too much time spent behind a safety car. But Paco, I'm sure, will try and lead us away and try and build up that 3-second gap once again.
Yeah, and I'm sure Paco really doesn't mind waiting behind a safety car a couple extra laps to make sure his mediums are slowly warmed up, slowly brought into the track, because if you warm up too quickly, it really doesn't help with the deck. So this is giving him a perfect opportunity to try and nurse these medium tyres at the start of a stint to get them into an operating window nice and gently without having to brush too much rubber off the tyres, without having to go and pick up marbles, without having to necessarily weave and put the tyres under too much strain. Realistically as well, it's also given every single one of these drivers a brilliant opportunity to recharge their ERS, as will flash up on screen here. You can see that little bit of brake dragging Paco is doing down the straight. Constantly having that brake held in is slowly going to keep his brakes at a temperature where it's able to recharge the battery. So we should potentially see all of these drivers with full battery just having to follow one another for a couple laps before that DRS gets opened once again. And then, dare I say, Darragh, we might see a bit of carnage.
We might see a bit of carnage, and that is what we've got to be aware of as we get this race nearly back underway. Paco will get us going. That sim racer is so far behind Eric. I'm not too sure what he was doing there.
I think he went lawn mowing there. I can see a couple of tyre tracks on the grass.
Yeah.
So I think he was taking a very alternative line, but of course, it's safety car restart, and you've got to think, when is Paco deciding to go? Darragh, if it was you, where would you be going here?
I would be going midway through Ravazza 1. So just, if I was Paco right about now. But he's not gone quite yet. He might go midway through Ravazza 2. Oh, he goes now. That was a very good restart because he went to the inside. I thought he was just going to do a little bit of a weave. He caught me out, as well as Scarenzi. But he's done a very good job to get this race back underway. The gaps are quite large. That sim racer has got through an Eric, but Eric's come into the pit lane. Was there contact maybe on the safety car restart, which is why that sim racer was that far back? We'll have to find out maybe post-race. But either way, Paco, great restart. He leads Scarenzi and Rabin in 2 and 3. And he's now just going to try and build that gap, pull away. It's 7/10 at the moment. It could be over a second by the end of this lap.
Potentially, but you've got to think that Rabin and Scornsey understand the situation and the gift they've been given under the safety car. I'm sure they'll be deploying everything in their toolbox to try and keep that gap to Paco, but Paco doesn't want any of it, does he? Look at him, he's already deploying the battery, he's already trying to pull that little bit of a gap, but Scornsey is doing just as much to Rabin, and Rabin is doing just as much to that sim racer. All three of these drivers seem to be in separate leagues at the minute. They're all finding each other, they're finding the pace where the other drivers aren't, they're slowly having that little concertina effect where one catches up, another one drops back, then that one catches up, then the other one catches up, then the other one drops back, and it's just one of those slow motion, you know, you can sit here and watch it all day because these drivers understand where each other are quick, and that's evident by the way they're deploying the battery in certain aspects of the track to make sure they can keep that 1 second buffer. But you've got to start thinking as well, if these lot all keep up into this sort of, you know, rhythm of managing that 1 second gap, perhaps the likes of Tintoreno and Rapid Kidditch can slowly start to reel them in by using the DRS, by having that benefit of the extra couple attempts per lap they'll gain from the DRS. As long as they're able to keep the noses clean and not fight too hard throughout the rest of the lap, that is going to be the key for them to keep within this race.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're on lap 12 of 32 though, so we're just past the third distance in this race. Banana may be looking for a move on Kitch as they run their way into the Villeneuve chicane, but no can do for him there. And then as they run into Toast, of course, a little bit off camber, uphill, rising up towards Piratella. You're not going to make a move at Piratella unless you have got a massive, massive pace advantage. Or are just a little bit silly, or you're desperate at the end of the race.
I'll tell you what, we did see the one time Pierre Gasly put it around the outside around Piratella. For me, overtake of the season, but it never got it awarded. It wasn't even nominated, which hurts me a little bit inside. But then again, you know, I don't make the rules. I don't get to pick the nominees because otherwise we would see a lot more of Esteban Ocon and Pierre Gasly. But nevertheless, we've got a lot of drivers here who are looking to close up the gaps to the cars in front, and Rabin is a prime example of that on the medium compound tyre. Slowly reeling in Scornsey, not necessarily by too much and not too quickly, but he's doing enough just to keep Scornsey honest, making Scornsey keep pushing that car, keep pushing the tyres, and that's not exactly what the hard tyre compound likes the most, is it? Being forced to keep up pace with the mediums through the initial starting stint, because towards the end of the stint, once all the tyres go through that cliff, go through that drop-off, their pace kind of averages out quite a bit. And the quicker you can kind of get those hards to that drop-off point, the better it'll be for the medium runners. Hence why Rabin is slowly just keeping that pressure on Scornsey, just making sure Scornsey is having to push that Haas car, having to use a little bit more of those tyres than he might necessarily like. So when it comes to the end of a race and the tyres are at more equal playing field, yes, the mediums will be worn slightly more, but Scornsey at that point will also be feeling the effect of having that tyre wear, because realistically, once the tyres get shot in this game, there's very little you can do to kind of resuscitate them back to life.
Yeah, because of course, particularly with the Darragh, like you said, when you push them too hard too early, you never really see too much of a pace advantage when the mediums start wearing away. So it's that give and take really at the same time. Rabin's going to have DRS, but I don't think it's going to be close enough to make a move down into turn 1 to start lap 14 of 32. Tintoretto's got a 3-second. I mentioned it during qualifying. You often see quite a few time penalties here at Imola. Very easy, just extend just a little bit of the track at quite a few corners. You think down at Piratella, down at Aquaminerale, at Variante Alta, and Ravazza as well. You can just about extend every lap, so you just got to be really careful, and that's why we're seeing some 3 seconds pop up on the board. But yeah, Rabin, Simracer, and Scorenzi, they are leading this charge against Paco, but all the while Paco is just gaining more and more away. But we have got this second train behind between Rapid Kitchen, AJ Mack, or even Bunsey behind, I should say, from 5th to 9th, which could be an interesting little train for the points in, 10-8, 6-4, 10-8, 6-4, and 2. But like I said before, big points at the start of the season can really set you up for a good run in the early stages, and then it's just confidence for the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, Darragh, how many times have we seen here over 6 seasons of PRL? It feels insane to say that, considering how far the series has gone. It's phenomenal to realise how much consistency plays a key role within the championships as well. Sometimes you don't have to be winning all the races. If you're finishing a consistent P4, P5, P6, that point tally will slowly accumulate. So when you do have those stellar performances where you get a race win and you get a P2, yes, it'll feel great, but once again, you're just bolstering your chances by consistently scoring points throughout the course of a championship. You know what they say, consistency wins you championships. It's not all about outright race pace all the time. But Paco is certainly trying to be, against that saying, by currently pulling out 4 seconds to Rabin, while Rabin, that Simracer, and Scorenzi all find themselves in this little train. They're being very well behaved so far, though, I will have to say.
Not being very well behaved at the moment. Maybe it's just that kind of mid-race, that cagey period, especially at the start of the stint where you don't really know what the strategy's going to go. You don't want to push too hard, you don't want to make too many silly mistakes. Particularly when you're Rabin, Simracer, and Scorenzi, that train in front of you, or that driver in front of you of Paco, you can't be fighting. If you start fighting, he's gone for good. There is no chance of getting back to him. But if you try and work together, play the strategy a little bit, you might be able to try and find him towards the end. That's the only way. And if by 5-6 laps to go, it's clear that it's almost impossible as Dom retires.
Safety car. Surely, dive it in the pits, absolutely.
Sim will it catch Paco here? It will catch Paco.
Oh dear.
So Paco hasn't been able to pit, and he's behind the safety car. That's massive.
That is absolutely chronic there for Paco. That's very, very unfortunate. And also for Rabin as well, he's decided to stick it out. But we do have an engineer in the YouTube chat, and of course it is Ellie, saying Rabin has a 2-stop strategy and Scorenzi is on a 1-stop, so that'll be interesting. Ellie, I do believe you are correct. It will certainly be interesting, and this safety car might have just threw a spanner in the works for Rabin and Paco's plan. If both of them were trying to opt for that 2-stop strategy, because now you've got to start realising that from P6, P7, P8, P9, P10, all of them have dived into the pits. They've got a fresh set of boots on. How well are they going to be able to kind of diverge between the different cars, trying to dart inside, outside? How many overtaking opportunities are they going to be able to construct? Because there's an ample of opportunities here if you are brave enough around Imola, if you trust the drivers around you enough. And I feel like, from what we've seen so far in this season, the drivers are very respectful of one another. They're more than happy to share the racing track. They're more than happy to give way to the racing line when they know it's not their fight. So potentially we could see Simracer and Scornsey making an absolute dash through the field, perhaps in the first lap after the safety car to try and catch back up to the likes of Rabin and Paco. And then, realistically, they're given a decision. Do they really want to pit now under the safety car? Understanding they'll fall back through the field? Or are they going to try and stick it out until the end of the safety car, build up a window again, to potentially dive it back in the pits? There's a whole lot of variables which can go on here for these drivers, and I'm sure their engineering team will be cracking on, but we see both P1 and P2 diving in the pits, which means Tintoretto leading a lap here at PRL. 5 laps ago, you might not have wondered. You might not have thought it. But safety cars have a way of causing magic. And, dare I say, there's a very famous saying, safety cars breed safety cars. So, perhaps it might not even be the last one we see here today around the Imola circuit in the beautiful region of Emilia-Romagna.
I haven't been. I wish I had been, if I'm honest, but I haven't been. As we see, that's Darragh coming for P7. But what we're going to have to see from Paco now is him making moves. He's been able to be out the front very comfortably on his own for the first half of this race. He's now going to have to make those moves for the end of the race. I mean, Tintoretto and Buncey might be able to help him out a little bit with holding up the guys on the fresh mediums, but he's going to have to make those moves himself to win this race now.
100%, and it comes back to the old adage. We're seeing it now with Verstappen in real F1. We saw it with Hamilton back when he was going through those prime years at Mercedes. We saw it with Vettel at Red Bull. We saw it with Schumacher at the Scuderia as well. The drivers who tend to kind of pull away from the field in the races, they don't always have the best racecraft. They're not great at overtaking. And how many times have been proved wrong, Darragh? Almost on every single one of those occasions. Bar a few, the drivers have been phenomenal at finding their way through the field when they find themselves in not necessarily a great position, whether it's like this because of a safety car, maybe a mistake, maybe an incident, but always able to somewhat find a way. So, is Paco going to channel his inner Michael Schumacher, perhaps his inner Sebastian Vettel, and try and carve himself through this field at a rapid rate so not proven? Not only does he have the pace to lead from the front in a dominating manner, but also has the racecraft to surgically pick his way through this field, find where the best overtaking opportunity places are, and it'll only be a matter of time before we get to find out as they've gone.
Yeah, we have got racing. It was very late call in because I think right at the back, Eric just about caught the pack. But we'll see if that sim racer can make a move on Buncey down into turn one. It doesn't look like he can. Meanwhile, Paco is going to look for the outside line at Tamburello. And I think he's going to make this one stick. Yes, he does. Sweeping through on Darragh. He makes his first position of what should hopefully be 7 for him to win this race. Banana's his next target, but at the front you can't forget that there's 2 slower drivers, Tintoretto and Buncey, on the older tyres. They're going to have to defend as hard as they can as Paco makes another position on Banana. Already, it's going absolutely mental already off the start.
Yes, of course, Banana ran a little bit wide there, but you can see Paco once again just keeping his nose there, just forcing Rapid to realise he's there as Buncey tries to force Sim Racer around the long way, and Sim Racer does a beautiful job to hold it around the outside and keep it balanced there. But surely you've got to start considering Scornsy's going to have to get past, in this next couple of quarters, because otherwise he's going to be very, very, very vulnerable to Paco, who's now on a lap fresher tyres, which might not seem like a lot, but realistically we know how the tyre ages work in this game. They are, sometimes the most ridiculous thing you'll ever see come the drop-off phases when one tyre is still going to be able to keep going for a good couple laps, because it is only about 1 lap younger. But you've got to consider as well, didn't have that full time under the safety car, didn't have that perfect opportunity to kind of nurse those tyres up to temperature like the rest of the drivers had who pitted a lap earlier. Potential there as we could potentially see Scorenzi making that move on Tiroteno. But once again, Buncey is still there in P2.
Oh!
Was that contact?
Yeah, I think that's front wing. Yeah, end plate gone for Paco there. On the back of hitting Tintoretto, the end plate. Front left end plate is not on the car. There's a spin at the back as well from Darragh. But that's massive for ex-Paco because he's probably going to have to fix that damage here. And the spin there for Banana. It's absolutely everything is going on now. There's side-by-side action between Rabin and Eric as they run up the hill. And I think it'll be Eric that comes out on top. But Paco, that's massive in the picture of the race. The fact that Scorenzi can't get through on Buncey as well is giving that sim race for a chance at the win. And this whole race has flipped on its head in the past 5-10 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, it's sim racing. Anything can happen. Safety cars breed safety cars, and it also breeds incidents, apparently, because Paco, with that wing damage, we've seen him go wide at Piratella on your screens as well. He's really struggling to keep that car turning in the way he liked it before, so perhaps it might be time to dive it into the pit lane. But once again, we go back to what we mentioned at the start of the race, Darragh. Is it really worth diving it into the pits? Surely, if it was 2-3% damage, it might not be worth it, but realistically, if you're missing a full end plate, it might be best to dive it into the pits. And that's exactly what Paco's done, and you've got to think he's going to have to be praying for a safety car to try and catch back up to the rest of his field now.
Yeah, I mean, he's not going to be a happy man, but he's going to have clean air. He's going to be able to pound the lap times out. He's just going to have to try the best he can. He's on his other medium tyres. He's only got 2 sets, which makes it even harder for him now to get to the end than it was just about 30 seconds ago. So it's just not going well for Paco, but he clearly has the pace. It's just whether he can use it and get through, but he's going to be a long way off. As we are on lap 20 of 32, we're much the way into the second half of this race, and we're now looking at a battle between that sim racer Scorenzi and you say Rapid Kitch for the podium here. We don't. Where's Rapid Kitch come from?
I'm not sure, but I can tell you where his battery's been going. He's been absolutely dumping his battery trying to keep up with Scorenzi, and Bunsey has done a fantastic job of defending, equally matching the battery deployment. So you can see both of them with a red flashing light indicating they're below 10% ERS. Rapid here is looking to try and harvest any sort of energy he can. Scorenzi as well, the red flashing light as well. It's not necessarily paying dividends. If you see the delta time to sim racer slowly start growing, you'll know why. Scorenzi doesn't have the battery to deploy. He can't really afford to waste much more battery to try and keep up the pace, because once you drop below that 10% threshold, you end up suffering a battery deployment pace penalty, for a lack of a better term, is what I'm going to say, where overall your engine power is slightly reduced. It might not necessarily seem like much, it might not be noticeable from the initial first glance, but if you are below that 10%, not only does it mean you've got a little less ERS to deploy and play with, it overall means you will just be going slower down the straight. So it's going to be critical for these drivers to find a way to recharge that battery, whether it'll be, you know, potentially braking a little bit earlier, braking a little bit harder, maybe just braking more consistency, heading through a lot of these flowing corners. Yes, it might be a little bit slower, but you've got to make sure you're above that 10% threshold, otherwise you're going to be in a whole world of pain. As we see that sim racer picking up yet another time penalty. Tell you what, let's flick it over to the penalty screens to give you guys a quick look at what's going on. We've got that sim racer currently out in the lead, but with 9 seconds worth of penalties, you would have to say Scorenzi and Rapid Kick are going to be the favourites to take this win. Rabin with 3 seconds worth of time penalties, Terratento with 3, Banana with 3, and Di Natale with 9 seconds as well. There's a lot still to play for, and there's a lot left of this race. It's only 10 laps, but how many times have we seen a race change the course of history over 10 laps? Dare I say countless amounts. It doesn't take 1 second to think of Abu Dhabi 2021. That only took 1 lap to change the course of history. And dare I say some of these drivers are going to be looking to try and make their own history by changing the way this story is supposed to be written around Imola. And I, for one, am fully here for it, as we've seen the AlphaTauri who got caught up in an incident right at the start of the race, currently finding himself in P7 on 8-lap old hard tyres, trying to catch up to Rapid Connor on 9-lap old hard tyres. Certainly doable for CES Eric, but it'll definitely be a challenge trying to get past Rapid Connor, even on the best of days, because we know he's a stern defender when it comes to racing on track.
Yeah, and Eric, you've got to remember, Eric was the driver that I believe was blocked in qualifying, wasn't he?
Yes.
By the Red Bull, I believe it was of Bunsey. So, he's been on a good recovery since then. He's on that hard tyre, definitely going to be able to get to the end, of course, with just over 10 laps to go now. That sim race, as you mentioned, though, with those time penalties, equaling 9 seconds now, really is going to pay the price. Currently, we'd only finish down in, you're looking at, a change the thing. He'd finish in P5, just about ahead of Rapid Connor. But, you know, if he's already had 9 so far, that does not rule out him getting even more towards the end. So just keeping your nose clean is going to help the likes of Scorenzi, Kitch, and Bunsey here. But Bunsey's tyres as well, we've got to remember they are going to really start to drop off. And Rabin, we'll see him probably come through here, or at least try to. He's got barely any ERS, but he's going to go for the outside line down into the Tamburello chicane. Nearly beats himself on that curb, but there's contact as they make their way through the second part of the Tamburello chicane. And Bunsey is bouncing over the grass, and that invites Rapid Connor and Eric onto the back. But the short story is, Rabin is through, he's up into P4, and now we can try and start to chase after Kitchen Scarenzi and the Hasses.
Yeah, I'm sure the stewards might have a little look in that, but in my opinion, that was just a little rubbing his racing. If you're going too wide through Tamarella, you can expect a little bit of wheel banging, a little bit of trading paints. Although it's not necessarily what we like to see in this open wheel Formula 1 series, it's certainly something which can happen. And because of the way the game is, sometimes, a little bit of desync here and there can make contact look a lot worse than it is. Perhaps on their screens it might have just been a slight wheel tap. But I do want to point out really quickly, have you noticed that sim racer has all of a sudden stopped picking up time penalties? And have you noticed his pace start to drop off on that medium set of tyres? He's taking this a lot more cautiously now, isn't he? He doesn't want to push that car as much. He doesn't want to risk sliding the rear, trying to get it rotated furthermore. Because I feel like he's realised now, if he was able to get through the start of this race without picking up those time penalties, he would have been in a wonderful position to try and take a hold of this race win. But 9 seconds, it's a very, very large gap to try and build up to retain this lead, and it's something which doesn't look too feasible, considering we've only got 8 laps remaining of racing here.
And it reminds me of a league I used to do. And it was really a league of friends, and we'd all be talking to each other during the races, and there'd be this one guy, and his name was Matteo, and I did what I must have been over 50 races in this league, if not more than that, and he would never ever pick up a penalty. Never. And he would always gain positions because of it. He was not the fastest driver. He'd probably be, back end of the top 10, 6th, 7th, 8th kind of area. But he would always be top 4, top 5 in the championship come the end of the season. And it's because he would pick up 3 positions by not picking up penalties. And it can really impact your championship over the course of the season, particularly a short season like we have here in PRL, with only 10 races. If you lose a couple, let's just say you lose... Even if you go from 1st to 3rd, that's 10 points. That's an entire 5th position of points that you've lost, and it can be difficult to regain those. So you've got to really try and focus on keeping the car on the track within the straight and narrow. It's difficult to track like Imola. We might see less penalties when we go somewhere like Spain. More difficult to go off the track there, as we see Rapicona and Bunsey go at it down the inside for the Red Bull driver. But Rapicona doing the up and under a little bit, but Bunsey is going to be around the outside as they come into the Villeneuve chicane. He's going to have, most of his car in front, and Rapicona sees that. He lifts off a little bit. He lets the Red Bull go through, but he might have a go into Tosa. He will. He'll have the inside line here as they rise their way through this left-hander. Who has the better traction? I think it's going to be Bunsey, and he is going to lead them into Piratella. But yeah, like I was just mentioning, that keeping yourself penalty-free is crucial for a championship charge.
Yes, absolutely. Consistency wins you championships, as we've stated before. And also, keeping your nose clean. Just making sure you don't pick up any silly penalties. Making sure you don't go and have visits to the stewards after the races as well can do you a world of good. It can find you points where maybe you might not have necessarily deserved it on outright pace, but because of your credibility on track, because of your intelligent racecraft, because you're able to avoid a couple of the instances that you'll find, other drivers might get tangled up and might find themselves battling here, there, and everywhere. You can find yourself a whole bunch of time through those manners. And someone else who seems to have found a whole bunch of time is Scornsy. He's back within the DRS range of that sim racer, closing up there by 9/10 down that start-finish straight alone. Surely it's only going to be a matter of time before Scornsy isn't within the striking range of that sim racer trying to get a move onto that Mercedes car. I feel like perhaps we could potentially see it down the next main start-finish straight, but then again, you got to start thinking that sim racer has 9 seconds worth of penalties. Is he going to fight it too much? Is he going to deliberately lose out on time fighting Scornsy for a position where Scornsy doesn't necessarily even need to overtake that sim racer to win this race?
Exactly, and that's just a benefit you can be in. You can just manage exactly your position on the track. If you've got the DRS to that sim racer, you can just sit there quite comfortably in the slipstream, in the DRS, save a bit of fuel, save a bit of ERS, and if push comes to shove and you need to make that move, maybe because you're being threatened by rapid kicks behind, you can. You've got all the tools at your disposal to make that move happen. So Scarenzi is in a really comfortable position at the moment. He just needs to keep it on the track. If he doesn't pick up a penalty, I can see no reason why he doesn't win this race, unless we maybe have an incredibly late safety car. I think we've only got a couple of laps where that can even happen, of course. Can't come out in the final couple of laps, but Yes, Scarenzi in a very strong position. You can see there, backing off, not going for the move. He knows he doesn't need to make it, so he's not going to take the risk.
And Darragh, you know what? You took the words out of my mouth. I was about to say Scarenzi could take it slightly easier, not having to worry about pushing the car, not having to necessarily push the track limits. As I do believe we've got another retiree there. I do believe that's Di Natale in the final sector, but I can still see that car's running. But it is, again, a retiree on track, which can cause a safety car and can cause a VSC. As I believe Paco as well has also had an incident through Acqua Minerale, which will be something that we're going to have to keep an eye on for these front runners, because we know cars ghost once they end up getting lapped, but it can certainly still be very much off-putting for the drivers around them, whether it's going to be, depending on braking points, turning points as well. It could be all those small little tiny factors which can really impact where the drivers decide necessarily to brake, to turn in. If there's a ghost car in the way, that can throw you off an awful lot.
It can, absolutely, and he might, in this situation, possibly get involved in this battle for the lead. No, he's going to come into the pit lane. This could be a retire for Paco, because he would be a lap down. We'll see if he continues on, and he hasn't retired yet, so we might just about continue on. But that's in race from Scarenzi. He's put a lap on the pole sitter, which just shows how bad his second half of the race has been. But either way, bouncing their way through the opening chicane at Tamburello, Scarenzi's right close to the back of that sim racer, but he's not going to quite go for the move. He knows he's in that comfort position, he doesn't need to go for it, and with 5 laps to go, he looks alright for now. Battles that could be for position, Buncey and Eric, 6th and 7th. Of course, they've got Rapid Connor in front of them, but he's got that time penalty, so Buncey versus Eric is the battle for P5. Neither of them have got a penalty, and we might see a late move here in the closing laps.
Yeah, of course. You got to think, Buncey, on those 20-lap old medium tyres. My word, it must be something about driving a Red Bull and being able to whisper to your tyres all the beautiful sounds to make sure they keep alive for that little bit longer, because he's doing a terrific job considering how old and how decrepit those medium tyres must feel at this moment in time. But you do have to, consider, is Rapid Connor playing this smart? Is he offering the DRS to Buncey to make sure he can just keep a slight window to Eric in the hopes that Buncey will repay the favour and maybe defend Eric off very fiercely in the final couple of laps to build that little bit of a time which Rapid Connor needs? There's a lot of potential communication which could be going on through the way these drivers are sort of acting on track, through how they're operating their machinery, making sure other drivers can gain and, necessarily leech off of them, for a lack of a better term, to make sure that not only can they get a prosperous race, but they can also sort of help the other drivers to get the results both of them would necessarily like. Because at the moment, with that little DRS train which has formed, Buncey doesn't seem to want to make a move on Rapid Connor, and Eric desperately seems to want to make a move on Buncey, but he's just not able to close up enough in time in order to get that move, because Buncey has that DRS.
Yeah, I was seeing in the YouTube chat, Maundy makes a very good point that the Red Bull may be in trouble on the tyres that he's on. 21-lap-old medium tyres compared to 15-lap-old hards. Of course, they're still both very old, but 21-lap-old medium tyres, you're really going to start to feel the pain in these closing few laps. 3 laps, of course, when they get to the line this time. Yeah, look at that. It's much better traction for Eric, and Buncey's at risk of losing the DRS. This is what's been keeping him ahead of the AlphaTauri, but if he loses it, which he almost certainly will here, yeah, you can just see the AlphaTauri coming through, but Buncey will relinquish the position actually by quite a bit. I thought he maybe would have just given the position to try and get the DRS back down towards turn 1, but yeah, Buncey not going to be close enough to make the move back at turn 1 with only 3 laps to go, and Eric might be on for a P5 finish here. Meanwhile, at the front, still Simrose and Scarenzi going 1 and 2. Buncey has come into the pit lane, maybe puncture territory. That could be something to consider, but Buncey still should be able to pick up a point for P10 regardless, because Paco is of course a lap down. But been interesting, hasn't it, just to see some of the battles progress through the field, some of the strategies work out, but I think with 3 laps to go, it's pretty safe to say that Scarenzi is, the hot favourite to win this one.
Absolutely. I mean, realistically as well, looking down the start-finish straight, he was more than happy to lift and coast behind Sim Racer. He wasn't too happy with the thought of overtaking. He didn't want to put his car in jeopardy. He didn't want to risk an overtake. And he's perfectly entitled to do that because of the 9-second penalties that Sim Racer has acclaimed. Scarenzi doesn't need to make the move on track. He's more than happy just to sit back, relax, make sure he stays within the track limits, and kind of see out the rest of this race. And dare I say, Rapid Kitch doesn't necessarily seem to have the pace to catch back up to these guys without the DRS. Because you got to remember as well, all the time while Scorenzi's got this little bit of DRS, he's going to be setting quicker lap times than Rapid Kitch. Slowly just keep pulling away further and further. Doesn't matter how much Scorenzi decides to back off coming out of those final 2 corners. You can always see the DRS pulls him along absolutely beautifully right to that back of a Mercedes car again, forcing Mercedes just to push that a little bit harder if they want to finish ahead on track. But I'm sure Scorenzi wouldn't mind getting an overtake come the final lap of this race to make sure he wins on track as well as on the penalties.
It's always nice to win it on track, isn't it?
It is.
Always we see Thacker retiring from the session. He won't pick up points either way, but always nice to win it on track. But at the same time, that you get an extra little bit of satisfaction, don't you, by winning in P2? You feel like you've outsmarted the person who won it on track. So in a way, you still kind of have that satisfaction. I'm sure he'll probably go for it if he has the run down in towards turn 1, Scorenzi. But, I mean, if he's going to be side-by-side, he knows not to risk it as Sim Racer goes wide. Might allow Scorenzi through, but Scorenzi says, no, I'll sit here. I'll wait for the DRS. You don't have to give it away just yet. I'll just come past you at turn 1 and we'll just see them going on to the final tour of this Imola circuit, and I think Scorenzi will go for this move down into turn 1. But he's really driven well, hasn't he, on this in this second stint?
Yeah, he's kept his nose clean. He's done exactly what he needs to do. He's fought his battles well. As we see Scorenzi now get him that pass. I mean, end of the day, although the Mercedes username might be that Sim Racer, all of these drivers are Sim Racers at the bottom of their heart, aren't they? All of them want to win on track. No one necessarily really likes to win on penalties. Yes, you might feel smug, but at the same time, you can also feel very smug about being able to get a last lap overtake, exactly how Scorenzi has done. And he's kind of run his race in his own little bubble, let's say. He's not necessarily worried too much about Paco. He's kept his nose clean. He's understood what he needs to do. And the safety cars, yes, they have helped him, but at the same time, they've also helped other drivers who have found themselves in similar positions. Look at Rapid Kitch, that Sim Racer. But the fact Scorenzi was also able just to keep himself clean throughout the entirety of this race has clearly played dividends, hasn't it? Because he's been able to hold on to the back of that Sim Racer. He's not felt the need. He's not felt the pressure to make sure he can make that overtake. He's been able to just cruise behind, recharge that battery a little bit, and dare I say, come home in a deserving P1.
Really has been deserving of this win. I mean, he's going to come around Rabatza 2 now, and Scorenzi, he clearly wasn't the fastest driver here this evening. Paco really had the pace, but he's played it the best over these 32 laps at Imola, and he wins the season opener here at Imola. Rapid Kitch will finish P2, and it will be, I think, that Sim Racer who just about hangs on to P3 ahead of Rabin on the penalties. Rapid Connor will lose out on his P5 to Eric, and I think he lets him have it on the line as well. He didn't run out of fuel, so I think he just let him have it on the line. Eric P5, Rapid Connor finishes P6, and it will be Cruise Steamers finishing in P7 with Tintoretto in P8, and then it'll be Bunsey and Banana 9th and 10th. But a 1-2 for Haas, perfect start to the championship, and it really couldn't have gone much better for them this evening.
Exactly. I mean, you come in with the idea, okay, right, we want to have a good result, we want to have a solid start to the championship, and you walk out of it with a 1-2. Surely that is something to behold, and surely something I'll be talking about in a debrief slightly later on. But Darragh, I do have to ask you, who is your driver of the day?
Oh, that's a good question. That is a question that I hadn't prepared myself for.
Well, the game's giving it to Cruise Steamers.
Cruise Steamers. Of course, he started last. Let's have a look. Let's have a look at the results as when they come up on screen. And I'm going to go for, because Renzi had that good second part of the race. I might say Eric, because he drove a very nice race. He didn't have the best of starts. He obviously got blocked in qualifying, but in the end came home for P5. So yeah, I think I'm going to go for Eric this evening, because he had a fantastic race overall, and P5 definitely well deserved after the qualifying that he had. Scorenzi and Rapid Kitch, though, were 1 and 2, and then it was that Sim Racer and Rabin in P3 and 4. Eric, Connor, Cruise Steamers, Tintoretto, Bunsey and Banana were your points finishers. The other 5 didn't quite make the flag, but Paco did set the fastest lap, and of course did take pole position with Denart, Mackie, Domwalls and Rapid Mini as well, not finding the flag. But in the end, I think, Josh, that was a That was a cracking opening race of the season, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was absolutely fantastic. It was action-packed. We, of course, had a little intervention from a safety car. Don't feel like we can complain too much. It definitely brought a level of excitement to the PRL opening season. And, of course, this is only your Tier 1. Again, we'll be back tomorrow to do the Tier 2 as well. Same track, same time, same place. And I, for one, absolutely cannot wait for it. But, yeah, no, it was absolutely brilliant, and I just can't wait for tomorrow, and I can't wait for next week as well, when we head to the Circuit de Barcelona Catalunya, which I realised, after doing a bit of research yesterday, the reason why it's had a name change is because the Council of Barcelona now own a part of the circuit. Hence why Barcelona's in the Catalunya title.
I didn't know that.
Well,
Fun little fact there.
You do now, Darragh, but... Dare I say, that's been a fantastic race, and I, for one, am very much looking forward to next week. But until then, we are going to have to say goodbye for now. I mean, I've been JGM. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed seeing me in the commentary box here at PRL. It's been a great pleasure to be here. And Darragh, of course, as well. It's been a pleasure to join you, my friend.
You too. And I am looking forward to tomorrow night after that opening race. And, of course, we will be back at Imola tomorrow night, as you mentioned. And Spain next week, but I mean this race sets up with a great championship picture to come in the coming weeks, and yeah, thoroughly looking forward to it. And yeah, I think we can say that we will be back tomorrow, won't we?
Absolutely.
In PRL for Tier 2, and we'll see how they get on for 32 laps of Imola. But between now and then, we hope you enjoy the rest of your evening and have a lovely Wednesday. But we'll be back for PRL Tier 2 tomorrow night, the opener of Season 12. And it'll be myself and it'll be Josh as well back again tomorrow night, and we're looking forward to it. So we'll see you then. Goodbye.